to start our work today, our information today, we have Dr. Bill Rom, who is here to talk to us about Adventure in His DNA, his 765-page memoir, detailing all the many things that he has done. Some highlights that I'm going to mention is that Dr. Rom is an Ely-lite, and he graduated the Ely Memorial High School in 1963. He's been a Burnside Lake Cabin resident since 1994. He was a wilderness canoe guide for 10 summers in the 60s. And he went to the University of Minnesota Med School, graduated in 1971. This is his 7th Tuesday group presentation with us of various different topics. The most recent one was on the Voyager sculptures that are in Whiteside Park. So if you haven't seen those, I highly encourage stopping and taking a look. And that I also know that he has 4 more lakes before he has visited every lake in the Boundary Waters canoe area. He's at 1,096 lakes. And on August 3rd and 4th, he's going out with Riley Smith to get the last 4 lakes, and we'll be at 1,100 lakes. And so stay tuned for a potential update later about how all the lakes are. But I'd like to welcome Dr. Rom up to the podium.
Thank you, Jess. It's good to be back on Tuesday group. I was fortunate to get those mugs for the first 4, and then they ran out for my 5th. And then last summer, they had a flood in the pottery, so I missed on the 6th, and it looks like I might make the 7th. So I'm going to talk about a memoir. And to write a memoir, you need 2 things. First of all, you need to be famous. None of us are famous.
Grabbing some sound.
Okay. So I read Tony Fauci's memoir. He's famous. You've all heard of Tony Fauci. He's in this book. Tony Fauci's memoir is 450 pages. I was at 245,000 words, which translated to 765 pages, and no publisher is going to touch anything more than 300 or 400 pages. So there's 2 things that you just have to write a memoir, and I didn't have either one. So I spent 5 years writing academic medicine like an adventure, major expeditions. I thought I would have just a notebook because nobody would publish this. I went to my medical publishers thinking surely they would publish this, and they all responded to me, Bill, Dr. Rom, we publish medical textbooks, not memoirs. So I struck out. Secondly, I went to agents. On the internet, you can look up agents. I thought I could find a few who might like the out of doors. I sent them the outline. They never responded to my email. I was beginning to get a little worried. I went to Harvard School of Public Health and assiduously read Harvard Magazine. In the back, I saw 2 advertisements. We publish memoirs, thinking that Harvard graduates have enough ego that they would actually write a memoir. I sent both of them my outline, and only one responded. That was small batch books. This is the memoir. And I'm going to do a couple things. I didn't order a copy for every one of you. However, if you write down your email, am I on Zoom here? Okay. If you write your email, I will send you a PDF of the cover and the text. Mind you, it is 765 pages. but there are the table of contents of about 8 books at the end, so it's really 822 pages. If you reach 765 on a PDF, send me an email. I congratulate you for reaching the end. I'll pass this around so that you might have a look. Okay. The cover is a photograph taken by Holly Meeker-Rom. She's in the bow of a canoe on the Nahanni River in Northwest Territories. It's probably the most spectacular river in North America. We did an 8-day trip with Neil Hartling, portaging over Virginia Falls after flying in with a twin otter. And after a mile portage over twin Virginia Falls, 2.5 times higher than Niagara, Holly Meeker-Rom took one look at me and said, "This is life-threatening." Holly Meeker-Rom is sitting right next to me here. How do you make it go forward? The book contains 400 color photographs. It has 20 watercolors by Holly Meeker-Rom. One of them is of Bill Rom on a donkey riding up to Santorini in Greece in 1965. But there is a little bit of fame to earn a memoir, and that is if you make the front page of the New York Times. I made the front page of the New York Times, 1992, during the TB epidemic in New York City. That's a picture of me with an N95 mask on, interviewing a TB patient, with a New York Times photographer able to capture the precautions on the door leading into the room. It was below the fold, so it probably isn't enough fame to make a memoir. So the book begins with life at New York, at New York University and Bellevue with the TB HIV epidemic. But there's 2 things I did to earn the position of a professor of medicine at New York University and director of the pulmonary programs and chest service at Bellevue. One was I had already been an assistant and associate professor at the University of Utah. There, I founded the Rocky Mountain Center for Occupational and Environmental Health that was funded by the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, a component of the CDC. It's a $4 million grant that got their attention in 1977. So this is a picture of what we looked like 50 years ago. We all looked like that at one time. And it's a picture of the cover of the Rocky Mountain Center designed by Holly. So I've been on a book tour for 6 months, and this is Kurt Hagman, who is currently the director of the Rocky Mountain Center, and he even named a classroom, William Rom Classroom. So it was 50 years since I started this, and he had a banquet for 100 people at the Grand America Hotel to celebrate with the memoir. He also showed that he had an endowed chair and state funding for the Rocky Mountain Center over the 50 years, so that the finances were solid. When I began at the University of Utah, I decided to do a book on environmental and occupational medicine. That was a textbook that went through a 2nd edition, a 3rd edition, and a 4th edition. And we also did a book on health implications of new energy technologies, published in 1980. And it even covered something called climate change. Elton knows very well. That was 1980. It was 7 years before the congressional testimony on climate change with Jim Hansen and Vice President at that time, Congressman Al Gore. When I got to NYU, everything was TB. So we did 2 editions of a book on tuberculosis. Utah is an incredible place for the out of doors. This is our first granddaughter. Nicole on Mount Timpanogos. Daughter. First daughter, Nicole. And as she grew up, I carried her on my shoulders on the Escalante River, part of the incredible Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, 2 million acres protected until yesterday, when all 2 million acres were eliminated, along with Bears Ears. I don't need to say anymore. You know who did that. Holly did batik in those days, and this is a batik she did of delicate arch, protected in Arches National Park. So there's a reason I wrote a memoir, and 2 Tuesday groups ago, I think in 2022, a very famous Aspenite, Bob Wade, who ran Ute Mountaineer, and a recognized portrait artist, Ron Bayans, and I flew in a twin otter up to Winnisk Lake and paddled about 400 miles north to Hudson Bay. When we landed in Winnisk Lake and did our first portage, we saw how incredible rough that river was. And we called it the wild waters of the Winnisk, and we wrote up a Explorers Club article about the trip. There's one photograph you will not find in this book, and that's that photograph right there. I dare to show it, but we all make mistakes in our life. We came to a rapids. I chose a braid that went to the left because the right had a lot of rocks. It had clear water. I saw a rock that we could get to and get out of the canoe and explore the rapids ahead of us. But as soon as we got into that clear water, it swiftly carried us into a hole and then up over a gigantic rock, flipping the canoe over. And I grabbed on the end of it. And the last thing I knew was I was underwater. I knew I had to hold my breath, keep my feet out so I wouldn't hit my head on a rock. And about an hour later, I was drifting down the Winnisk River, worried that my 2 colleagues would have drowned or something. But fortunately, they got out, and you can actually see one of them in the water, and they were able to flip the canoe off a rock, get down the rapids, and I was able to hike back up to them after about an hour of drifting downstream. Then I said, it's time to write a memoir if you ever do it, because life is finite. So the second thing, other than the University of Utah that merited getting a job at NYU, was being at the National Institutes of Health. The National Institutes of Health is the crown diamond of the American government. It is where practically all medical research is conducted. About 10 to 20% is internal at the NIH, and the other 80% or so is done through grants to universities throughout the country and throughout the world. It is an incredible place. I was blessed to be accepted to the NIH and worked as a bench scientist for 6 years. But we do present our papers to national meetings. This is the American Thoracic Society, and we're all having a good time. I'm in there at one of the bars in New Orleans. I was also fortunate to be sent by the NIH to India to study filariasis. And here I'm bronchoscoping about 40 individual Indians who had filariasis to study tropical pulmonary eosinophilia. The boss of our laboratory was this man, Ron Crystal. And here we are commemorating a William N. Rahm environmental lung disease laboratory in Bellevue several decades later. So Ron was a difficult master. It took years to produce any papers. My first paper there was looking at the lung disease that miners get. We all know about miners and getting silicosis, coal miners who get coal workers pneumoconiosis, asbestos workers who get asbestosis. It had never been elucidated how these dusts cause pulmonary fibrosis and inflammation. So my job was to recruit coal miners out of West Virginia, silicotics out of foundries in Virginia and Pennsylvania, asbestos workers from Baltimore, Richmond, Washington, D.C., and bronchoscope them, study their macrophages, and figure out the growth factors and oxidants that cause lung disease. I thought once I published that paper, I had done everything I could care about in academic medicine, but my boss said, you need to discover something. And he assigned me the task of an alveolar macrophage, which is a cell in your lung, derived growth factor that he had described. And my job was to figure out what that was. And it became an insulin-like growth factor. And it took 4 years of research to figure that out, publish it. And I was rewarded with a job offer at NYU. When I got to NYU, Holly Meeker Rom painted the training program for our pulmonary program, where we had meetings, physiology conferences, X-ray conferences with masks with all the pulmonary fellows at NYU and Bellevue. On top of that, I was assigned the program director of what's called the General Clinical Research Center. There are 60 of those across the country. Each one is about $5 million a year. All clinical research funded through the NIH is generally conducted through clinical research centers. It's a massive clinical outlay that we all pay for to get new drugs and new treatments and new everything. During my time, the big push was to get treatments for HIV, AIDS. Tony Fauci received billions, and NYU at Bellevue Hospital had some of the most HIV patients, and we were rewarded with a lot of work. So this is in the laboratory and also having research conferences. Since we had all these HIV patients, one of our major areas of research was on something called cytokines. Cytokines are what cause inflammation, and it's what makes us get old. And if we want to live to 101, we need to control our inflammation. So when macrophages are infected with HIV, they get inflamed, they release cytokines, and the cytokines trigger HIV replication. In other words, the HIV multiplies in places where there's TB being engulfed by macrophages, activated, releasing cytokines, and with lymphocyte contact results in HIV replication. That was a big deal. Up to then, I had never been able to get a paper into this journal. The Journal of Experimental Medicine is published by the University of Rockefeller. The University of Rockefeller and the Journal of Experimental Medicine is one notch higher than the New England Journal, okay? Everybody knows the New England Journal of Medicine. And second, we discovered that in TB, you needed interferon gamma to control the infection. And we modulated this with a recombinant interferon gamma with a study done in South Africa at the University of Cape Town. So after several NIH grants and working at the University of Cape Town, I was made an honorary professor there. And this is wearing the ATS t-shirt at the Cape of Good Hope. But of course, you can't go down there without taking Holly Meeker Rom. So Holly is with me on an expedition to Kruger National Park to see the big five: lions, leopards, elephants, water buffalo, rhinoceros. This is a St. Louis Rams tackle that was with us. There's our driver, our spotter. After all this TB work and HIV work for a decade, 9/11 happened. 9/11 created tons of very hazardous dust, and it was breathed by hundreds of thousands of people in Lower Manhattan and in Brooklyn. And this is a painting of the World Trade Center collapse that Holly did, that's in the book. So we did studies on the effects of World Trade Center dust. We also did CT scans to screen for lung cancer. And I was fortunate to recruit a scientist who was really good at elucidating factors that cause lung cancer. And we wrote a paper on aldehydes are the predominant forces inducing DNA damage and inhibiting DNA repair in tobacco smoke. So we're getting to the end of the academics. You get an award called the Distinguished Achievement Award from your professional organization. Here I am receiving that. Holly was with me in New Orleans. These are members of our faculty. And then after 25 years of running the pulmonary division and 12 years at NIH in Utah, we had a symposium that was attended by 3 deans of schools of public health, the director of the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, and a great collection of scientists for a scientific symposium. Both daughters attended, but Holly had a special art show at New York University called the Climate Alarm, with about 15 paintings of glaciers melting, desertification, and so on. During this period, I was fortunate to do a sabbatical and work at the Russell Office Building of the United States Senate. For someone you all know, Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton. I was able to work on air pollution, the World Trade Center dust, protecting a wilderness area in El Yunque in Puerto Rico. At a Christmas party, I asked her if I could submit a bill to protect this wilderness in Puerto Rico. She gave me a very startled look, like, we're New Yorkers, aren't we? I said, there are 800,000 Puerto Ricans in New York. And she said, oh, that's a great idea. So we were able to write a bill, and this is the bill to protect a wilderness in the Puerto Rico. She did engage on climate change with Joe Lieberman and Senator John McCain on the McCain-Lieberman bill from 2003. So since all of us either have gray hair or no hair, we can remember these folks back in the early aughts. So I requested the staff of Hillary Clinton to have her speak on this climate legislation on the Senate floor. I wrote up a speech and suggested these photographs as illustration. 1970 of me climbing Kilimanjaro with a huge glacier at Uhuru Point. 1999, 29 years later, no glacier. Nicole Rom, our daughter, it looks like the same person at the same point at the same time at Uhuru Point, showing that glaciers are disappearing. So I did 10 years or more teaching climate change. And this is my class for NYU School of Global Public Health, teaching climate change at NYU Shanghai. So this is my class. And I'll say a couple things about climate change, since all of a sudden that's the topic du jour. Who's good at math? We need a good math person. So for the past 10 years, normally the temperature goes up 0.18 degrees Celsius per decade. For the last 10 years, it's been 0.35 degrees Celsius. It's almost double for the last 10 years. So if we keep at that pace for 4 decades, 0.35 twice is 0.7, 3 times is 1.05, 4 times is 1.4. We got a bunch of mathematicians. So 1.4 on top of what we are today, 1.5, that's 2.9 degrees Celsius in 40 years. That is unbelievably hot. So that's part of the data that shows that climate change is accelerating. The second is, you've all heard of the Keeling curve. Elton will tell everyone of the Keeling curve. That's the CO2 rising on the summit of Mauna Loa in Hawaii, where it's measured. The background of CO2, which is the prime greenhouse gas, is 280 parts per million in those bubbles in those glacier drilling for the past million years of time. We've never exceeded 280. So if you double that, it's 560. 560 is supposed to be 3 degrees Celsius, just like the temperature. We are currently at 430. So 560, we still have a mathematician in the room. 560 minus 430 is 130 ppm. Last year, we increased at 3.5 ppm. The year before, 3.5 ppm. If CO2 goes up 3.5 ppm for the next 40 years, that's 140 ppm, and we'll have double CO2 at 3 degrees Celsius. So climate change is accelerating no matter how you look at it, whether it's CO2 or temperature. The consequences are heat waves, 96 degrees yesterday. The Lancet says 500,000 people will be dying globally from heat waves. Air pollution, fossil fuels and coal-fired power plants, 5 million die from fossil fuel air pollution globally. Severe weather, 500,000 will be dying from hurricanes, floods, droughts, and so on. So the mortality is incredible. But what's more incredible than the mortality is the solution. Solar panels, batteries, wind, electric vehicles, heat pumps. All the solutions are readily available. They'll even get cheaper in the future. Compared to nuclear, Bill Gates is spending enough money on one nuclear modular power plant that is the equivalent of 20 utility scale solar farms. So it's 20 times more expensive to go nuclear than it is to go solar. So the solutions are readily available. Ely, the most important topic. So I grew up as a wilderness canoe guide here in Ely, working for Canoe Country Outfitters for my father for 10 summers. In 1963, my father sponsored a $1,000 prize from Drummond Canoe to paddle from Ely to Atikokan or Atikokan to Ely and back. So the photo on the right is Bill Rahm with Tom Mackey, another Elyite, and we were in the International Canoe Derby from Atikokan to Ely and back. Don Belan was the winner. We came in 9th and suffered enough from that. It was 27 hours from Atikokan to Ely, going all night through Kashipiwi and everything in the dark and all the portages in the dark. The wind was against us. Going back, it was calm. 19 hours going back. And we had dark all along from Ranger Bay going up to Kashipiwi. All those portages were done in the dark. And then we got sunlight coming up in Cairn Lake and going up north toward Atikokan. This is the map of the Quetico and the Boundary Waters canoe area. The black lines are the canoe routes that I've done. So in this book, there is a publication of this map. That represents 10 summers of wilderness canoe guide and 40 or 50 years of marriage to Holly Meeker Rahm, where she kept thinking all the lakes look alike. So I kept taking her to lakes I hadn't been to, and she never knew that I was filling up this map with black lines. And she gamely carried a gigantic pack all the time while I carried a pack in a canoe. And then we got our daughters into it. So that's just about all the lakes. So I went to the University of Minnesota Medical School on a handshake with my father that he would buy a Pan Am ticket for me to go around the world if I went to the University of Minnesota and worked as a residence counselor. It didn't cost them any money. Now medical school is anywhere from 30 to 60,000 a year. So in my senior year, I did an elective at University of Edinburgh. This is the Royal Infirmary, 1970. Then I went on a trip around the world for 100 days. This is the Sphinx in Egypt. And following that, I did an internship at the University of California and a master's in public health here at the Harvard School of Public Health, where I was very interested in the environment. Then I did a fellowship at Mount Sinai in New York with Irving Selikoff, who is really the father of environmental medicine. This is a picture of Irving. This is me reading x-rays. And then, as Jess said, we came to Ely in 1994 to start building our listening point. I had done enough of the singing wilderness. This book has many quotes from Sigurd Olson and photographs of him. So our listening point was with Barry Bissonnet in 1994, building a Finnish style log cabin with one of our sculptures that's in the park on one of the stones, a view down Burnside. Holly did sketches and some watercolors of all our trips. This is our bright red Canadian Old Town canoe Kevlar on Saginaw Lake. And then skiing. Ely is a famous town for skiing. John Kilman was our ski coach, Helen Lemmer. We won the state championship in 1962. And there's a trophy in Ely High School with our state champs. On the right is Dr. Rahm finally becoming what he wanted to do, which was a ski racer. I went to the University of Colorado and signed up for the ski team as a walk-on, and then I realized the entire team was a bunch of Olympians, and that my part of the ski team would be the dry land training in September and October, and then the team disappears to Europe to go racing, and I would be finished. So I did that for 2 years, and then realized that it's more important to study if you're ever going to get into medical school, and then I had to get straight A's after that. So for the past 10 years, I joined the Aspen Town Series, which are 6 races with skiers like every one of you in this room who think that they're still 19 and can't let go of things and get up there in the starting gate and shove off and go like hell to try to win a medal. So this past year, I was in the men over 80 and I won the silver medal. The other person in my group won the gold. So some of these expeditions include Elyites. I don't know if you remember Jack Nemi, he ran Border Lakes. This is Tommy Dayton from the Dayton family out on Jasper Lake. After med school, I realized I had 1 summer left to paddle across Canada, because after that, I'm sure I was going to meet some beautiful young lady and get married and settle down and not be able to take a summer off. So we paddled from Alberta at the Rockies, at the Peace River, coming out of the Rocky Mountains, going north to Lake Athabasca, across Lake Athabasca to the Churchill, which is the Lonely Land by Sig Olson. But Sig never did the lower half of the Churchill. We did it, and it was an extraordinary trip. 1,517 miles in 40 days without a bath. So while I was in New York and a fellow at Mount Sinai, I joined Ray Genet, who is the famous mountaineer in Alaska, to climb Denali. And this is with Ray Genet at the Kahiltna Glacier, portaging tons of food twice a day with Foraker in the background, and finally reaching the summit of Denali at 20,320 feet. We had 1 death in our group due to high altitude pulmonary edema, so the chapter describes high altitude pulmonary edema. But Sig Olson was a mentor to my father. Sig was dean of the Ely Junior College at that time and convinced my father to go to the U of M for wildlife management. And he also mentored me about doing the Back River, the Churchill River, and here is a photograph of Sigurd Olsen. And if any of you can identify this individual, you get a gold medal. That's Robert Marshall, founder of the Wilderness Society in 1936. Bob and Sig did a 12-day canoe trip together. You can see Sig was a much younger man, but Bob explored Alaska and the North Fork of the Koyukuk River and wrote Alaska Wilderness about that. He made 4 expeditions, and his goal was to climb this mountain. It's called Dunarak, and he never was able to make it. So I was able to talk a colleague of mine into climbing Dunarak. And here we are at the summit with an Explorers Club flag. And then on the descent coming down from it, it was, we were roped up. We reached the most difficult part of the climb at around 6 p.m. at night and spent the next 3 hours climbing. And we reached the summit at 9 in the evening. And we couldn't get back to our camp, so we bivouacked on Marshall Lake. And a bivouac in the Arctic without a sleeping bag is basically a night without sleep, because as soon as you lie down and you almost fall asleep, you get wakened by shivering. It's so cold. The shivering kept waking us up. So about 4 a.m. or 3:30 or so, we decided to start hiking out of there. This is with mountain travel, the Potala in Tibet in 1982, before the Chinese really changed Lhasa. They filled in this beautiful lagoon with a paved area of bricks and lost that beautiful lagoon. We did go to several of the 8,000 meter peaks. We went to the north face of Everest and saw the Rongbuk Glacier. This is the main Rongbuk Glacier. I was able to talk a Tibetan Sherpa into hiking and crossing this and going up to the West Rongbuk to take pictures of the north face of Everest. So we got up above 20,000 feet. But since all these Himalayas are climbed by large teams, I wanted to find a peak in Central Asia that hadn't been climbed by Americans. And I looked over the National Geographic Atlas, scouring that, and found a little arrow that said, source of the Yangtze River. I said, oh, that would be interesting. So I was able to get an Explorers Club flag and talk Geographic Expeditions leader Al Reed into getting us a permit from the Tibetans and map this out in the Tanggula Shan Range north of the Himalayas in what's called the Kunlun, and hire 2 vehicles, 2 drivers, a Chinese liaison officer, a climbing guide from the Exum School who spoke Chinese, and I talked a friend of mine into going with me. We were fundraising with a T-shirt that had a famous Tibetan Buddhist leader on the cover, on the front of it, designed and painted by Holly. And when we got to Tibet with that T-shirt, everybody looked at us and bowed and worshiped us because we had inadvertently put a very famous religious leader on our T-shirt. And so that's how we made money. I also went to Rolex Watch and made a pitch to get 10 grand to finance the expedition. Rolex was very generous. They didn't give us any cash, but 3 of us got Rolex watches. So I'm on year 29 of my Rolex watch that I still wear every single day. So here we are. This is Gila Dangtong, 21,722 feet. This is reaching the summit, and I was extremely short of breath. and didn't know right from left on a Explorer's Club flag. We got a picture and made the descent. We had one avalanche and one crevasse that we had to deal with, but we survived those quite well. There's another expedition that Holly and Meredith went with me on, a Russian icebreaker to Antarctica to try to reproduce Sir Ernest Shackleton's expedition. You remember in 1914, he wanted to cross Antarctica, but got frozen in at the Vosel Bay and spent a year and a half drifting across the ice and then into lifeboats and then to Elephant Island. And he sailed one of the boats to South Georgia to find whalers to rescue him. So we envisioned, so this is Sir Ernest Shackleton. This is his gravestone in Gravik in South Georgia. And we formed an expedition with 5 of the leading mountaineers in the country, probably the greatest one, Dave Hahn, and also Al Reed, who organized our Tibetan trip. This is Al Reed, got an Explorer's Club flag. And we crossed South Georgia on skis and skins to the Allardyce Mountains, where we put on crampons, as in this picture, and carried our skis over the mountains and down the other side along the route that Sir Ernest Shackleton took. This is our leader, Dave Hahn, who's done 15 Mount Everest summits, 39 Vinson Massif in Antarctica, 25 Denali's, 300 mountaineers. He led the expedition that discovered George Mallory's remains. If any of us think we're tough, there's always somebody who's infinitely tougher than we are. But he's probably America's greatest mountaineer. Back to Ely. Everybody knows Paul Shirky and Will Steger. So Paul was able to organize a journey to the Thule Inuit to join their spring hunt for walrus and seals. And here's a photograph of me and Paul Shirky with the Explorers Club flag with some of our dogs and Inuit at Siruopolik in northern Greenland. Here's one of the glaciers disintegrating up in northern Greenland. And here's our dog sleds. So we had 8 dog sleds and spent 8 days living on seals and having a grand time in the cold. So Holly has joined me on many of these journeys, but not the Greenland journey. But she joined me to go to Egypt and then to Petra and then to Wadi Rum. This is Wadi Rum, where she did a painting that's, you can barely see it at the bottom here. And she also joined me on a trip to the Marquesas, to Hiva Oa, and to Rapa Nui, or Easter Island, to explore those early civilizations. So I was able to do a lot of trips to Tibet and to Nepal, and also to Darjeeling in the Indian part of the Himalaya, but I hadn't done Bhutan. So I was fortunate to join geographic expeditions on a trip to Bhutan, to Tiger's Nest. And I used a book called A Portrait of Bhutan to study the country. But when I arrived, I told our Bhutanese leader that I would like the Queen to autograph my book. So this is the autograph. Dear William, with my warmest regard, the Queen of Bhutan. So lastly, one must learn to give back. And on my journey to teach in Shanghai, I was able to go to the Huangshan Mountains, who are very famous, halfway between Shanghai and a town called Wuhan in January of 2020, when there was some pneumonia in Wuhan. And all these climbers were coming from Wuhan to see these mountains. None of them were coughing, thank goodness. And Holly was asking me, what is happening over there? And I said, well, there's a strange pneumonia. Here is 2 two Chinese colleagues. I hired this Chinese doctor to work for me at Bellevue, and she married a businessman who went to NYU Stern, and they had two children. And his business back in Shanghai was successful. So he endowed a associate professorship in my name, and then David Camelhard came up with half of the funding. So there is a William Rom and David Camelhard, associate professor of medicine, with donor Frank Yao and Ying Chen at NYU. And this is Leo Segal, the first recipient of this endowed chair. This is last year's Tuesday group. Years ago, I decided I really wanted to have a sculpture in Whiteside Park, and we found a sculptor in Wyoming to design and work on this Voyager sculpture that we presented last summer. So with COVID, it got delayed, and then the foundry burned down just about when it was finished and had to go to another foundry. And we finally mounted it in December of 2024 on the coldest day in Ely. You can remember when it's minus 14, that would be so pleasant now. This is the close-up of the sculpture in Whiteside Park. Thank you. So, so if you want a copy, I can email PDFs, cover, and text.
That should fix the microphone issue. Thank you for your offer to send the copy of the book and the cover. I'll make sure that that sheet gets back to you. We have time for a couple of questions, but I know you'll probably be around for a few minutes after the presentation as well, correct?
The artist, Hollymaker Rom. More important, after all those expeditions, she's still with me. 53rd year.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Any questions you'd like to ask?
Dr. Rom, thank you very much for the compelling presentation. Some of us in the community who are interested lay people understanding inflammation, what you describe as cytokines, and kind of how to kind of suppress illness, are interested in your take on things like statins, which are demonstrated to have many of us around the table, how you're on those. And then there's this emerging finding, as I understand it, about the GLP-1 medicines like Wegovy, semaglutide, tirzepatide, in terms of how they can actually have an anti-inflammatory effect that can be helpful as well. Do you have anything?
So the major cytokines are tumor necrosis factor, interleukin-1 beta, and interleukin-6. There are now 30 interleukins, all inflammatory mediators. When I came to NYU, there was a Czech emigre who wanted to study cytokines, and his lab was right above mine. I went to him and asked him what I should study at NYU, and he said cytokines. So I started studying them, and he, along with another person, developed an antibody, a monoclonal antibody to tumor necrosis factor. So this was a key anti-inflammatory monoclonal antibody that was then commercialized into something called Remicade, which was just about the most wealthy anti-inflammatory in our medical toolbox. So it's used to treat ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, and then rheumatoid arthritis, and became a blockbuster drug. Dr. Vilcek became probably the most wealthy academic physician. He donated $100 million to NYU. The university gets half of the proceeds, and the university sold its half for $600 million. So NYU built a new hospital, new laboratories, and so anti-inflammatory medications are crucial. IL-6 and IL-1 beta, anti-TNF were used to treat shock syndrome, but shock was so massive that none of the antibodies were able to control it. So nowadays, there are antibodies to a whole variety of these interleukins, and they're endlessly advertised on TV now against skin forms of psoriasis, various Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. So you see these advertisements of anti-inflammatories endlessly now. So it's a big pharmaceutical business. And we actually deciphered interleukin-1 beta and interleukin-6 transcriptional regulation and published both of those from our laboratory. So that's described in the book how we did that. And I was really fortunate to hire some outstanding scientists to guide them on doing all these experiments. So it was a real fun couple of decades working in this basic science area and producing really good science. I might tell you that I delivered one of these books to Ron Crystal, who was the chief of our laboratory at the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. He was head of the Pulmonary Branch. He was next to Fauci and some of the other people, one of the major figures at NIH. And I hand delivered it to him and signed it for him. And then I got an email back from him. And he said, I read the chapter about the NIH. And he said one word, terrific. And I thought, thank God. And he said that we were at a time when he had recruited some really outstanding scientists to the NIH. So the NIH is utterly precious. And under the current administration, they're doing everything they can to destroy it. It's one of the saddest episodes going on in Washington, D.C., actually Bethesda, Maryland. But we're going to miss a lot. And we have 2 more years to survive this onslaught. So we have a lot of work to do in 2028.
Any other questions before we wrap up today?
Did you ever consider making 2 books, one for medical and one for adventure?
I was thinking, should we have one book about academic medicine and one book about expeditions? And I was thinking, the people in academic medicine really would enjoy reading about the expeditions. And the expedition people might really like learning some academic medicine. And both of them are adventures. And there's a chapter on genealogy where there's a lot of DNA adventure in the family with my father and some cousins and relatives going back to actually a country doctor in Minnesota in the late 19th century, delivering babies. And in those days, you didn't have money to pay a doctor. And this Dr. Trivedi in Berlin and my family received a gold watch years later and inscribed it was for the baby that he had delivered decades earlier. So when we look back, we do have some exciting things in our DNA. I found a statue in Springfield, Massachusetts of Deacon Samuel Chapin, a famous pilgrim from around the 1620s. And my grandmother found that we were 12th generation descendants of that statue of Samuel Chapin designed by Augusta St. Gaudens. So I have a selfie in the book with me with the statue behind me. So that was kind of fun. So it's actually kind of fun to put this together. And I've had 6 months of delivering this book to Marshall Helmberger the other day, who had a photograph of me right at the beginning. So I wish I had more, but they are incredibly expensive to produce. The PDFs I'm delighted to pass out.
And any other last questions before you all chat with Dr. Rom before you leave? I'm so glad that we were able to be here and learn about your broad definition of adventure and inspire all of us to look at the adventures in our lives. And I welcome everyone to chat a little bit before they leave today. Make sure you have put your email down if you'd like a PDF copy of the book. And then next week, it is our quarterly Meet New Eliites. And I know we should have several new Eliites, one of whom is right here with us today, very exciting, to present on their journey to Ely and their adventures after getting here.